It started as a quiet evening in the Deep Space Monitoring Station, the kind of night when nothing unusual ever happens. The sky above the desert was clear, scattered with endless stars. Inside the control room, the only sounds were the low hum of computers and the soft tapping of keys. Everything felt calm, almost too calm until one of the screens flickered for a second. A small line of numbers began moving across the monitor, a weak pulse of data that didn't fit any known pattern. At first, the team thought it was just background noise. Space is full of random signals, and most of them mean nothing. But this one repeated. Every few seconds, the same pattern came back again, clear and sharp, as if something or someone far away was trying to be heard. The technician on duty leaned closer, rubbing tired eyes. He ran a quick scan, filtering out the static. When the pattern stayed, he felt a chill run down his spine. It wasn't interference. It wasn't natural. It was deliberate. He called in his supervisor. Within minutes, 2 more experts were standing behind him, staring at the data stream as it kept pulsing in a rhythm that felt almost alive. The pattern was simple but strange, not random at all. It was built around a repeating sequence that matched no Earth-based transmission. Could it be one of ours? Someone asked quietly, but the database check came back negative. No satellite, no deep space probe, no human source matched the signal. The frequency was faint and old-fashioned, like something that had traveled for years before reaching Earth. When they plotted its source, the coordinates pointed far beyond any known human reach, somewhere near a dim red star 40-plus light-years away. That realization made the small group fall silent. They knew what it could mean. A signal coming from that far, repeating with purpose. It was a message. Over the next few hours, the discovery spread through communication lines like wildfire. Scientists from other observatories confirmed it. The same strange call had been picked up by antennas across the world, though most had ignored it as background noise until the alert came in. Once they looked closer, the data matched perfectly everywhere. The world's largest space agencies joined forces almost overnight. NASA, ESA, and several private observatories began decoding the pattern. Every specialist wanted to get a look at it. Mathematicians, linguists, even composers who saw rhythm in numbers. The message wasn't just numbers. It carried variations in tone, rhythm, and pitch, as if it were speaking through music rather than language. When the first computer model converted the signal into an image pattern, something breathtaking appeared, a wave-like symbol that resembled a heartbeat. Alongside it were smaller repeating codes that researchers quickly identified as universal references for distance and direction. Whoever sent this, they weren't trying to hide. They were trying to be found. Soon, translation teams around the world began building models. The pulse sequence repeated a structure similar to what humans used in Morse code, but simpler, more emotional somehow. When the initial translation came through, the entire decoding room went silent. The message was short, only 3 lines. "We are dying, help us. We believe you can hear us." It didn't take long for news to leak. Within a day, headlines around the globe carried the same shocking line: possible extraterrestrial SOS detected. Television stations showed scientists standing before screens full of strange symbols. Talk shows filled with debates. Some called it the greatest discovery in human history. Others warned it could be dangerous, a trick or a natural phenomenon misread as intelligent. But deep inside every curious mind, one thought refused to go away. What if it's real? Social media exploded. People shared theories, artwork, prayers. A few mocked it, of course. Humans always do that when faced with the unknown. But even skeptics couldn't ignore the data. The signal was too organized, too emotional to be an accident. Governments moved fast, but not fast enough to stop the wave of public excitement. In city streets and rural fields, people looked up at the sky at night, wondering who was out there, desperate enough to send a call for help across 43 light-years. Back in the decoding centers, more details began to surface. The pattern wasn't just words. It contained references to environmental collapse, pressure, heat, radiation. There were data spikes that looked like measurements of a dying atmosphere. In simple terms, the message was a distress call from a world tearing itself apart, but the most shocking part wasn't the message of disaster. It was the section that seemed to identify. What was hidden within the data were faint imitations, of old Earth radio waves and our own signals, echoed back with fragments of early broadcasts. Some of the first radio shows from the 1930s, the faint hum of old news reports, even the signature of early space transmissions. Whoever sent the message had clearly been listening to Earth. They knew about us. The alien call hadn't gone into the void blindly. It had been aimed at Earth specifically. That realization sent chills across the scientific community. Someone out there not only knew humans existed, but believed we could help them. Late that night in a dimly lit lab, a small group of researchers sat in silence, staring at the pulsing wave on the screen. One of them whispered, "Why us?" The question hung heavy in the room. Humanity had only just begun exploring its own solar system. We weren't advanced compared to the civilizations we dreamed about in science fiction. We still fought over resources, borders, and beliefs. Yet, for some reason, whoever sent the SOS believed humans were capable of helping them. Some called it coincidence. Others called it destiny. Over the following weeks, the signal kept coming, repeating every 12 hours like a heartbeat from the stars. The same rhythm, the same plea. It never changed tone, never stopped, almost like a voice refusing to give up hope. Across the world, telescopes locked onto the coordinates. The red star it came from was faint, but analysis showed a planet orbiting in the habitable zone. It was old and unstable, wrapped in dust and clouds, but possibly once full of life. The public named it Erebos, meaning the fading light. As governments scrambled to respond, secret meetings were held between world leaders. Some wanted to send an answer right away. Others feared it might attract unwanted attention. "What if it's a trap?" they asked. "What if it's bait?" But deep down, everyone knew humanity couldn't just ignore it. We had spent centuries looking up at the stars, asking if anyone was out there. Now someone was asking the same thing, and they were asking us. A quiet debate began inside the United Nations. Should humanity answer? Should we risk revealing more about ourselves? Or was it already too late? Had we been seen long ago? Among scientists, though, the decision was easier. To ignore a cry for help would go against everything human. Every explorer, every rescuer, every doctor, every volunteer. They all knew what it meant when someone called for help. You answer. It's what makes us human. So while politicians argued, teams of engineers and linguists began working in secret. They started building a reply. Night after night, as the signal kept pulsing, the decoding rooms filled with tired but determined faces. There was fear, yes, but also a strange excitement, a feeling that history was unfolding in real time. Some called their families to tell them they were witnessing something that would change the world forever. Others simply stayed quiet, listening to that steady rhythm, the voice from the dark. One of the scientists began recording it in audio form, slowed down to human hearing. When played through speakers, it sounded hauntingly beautiful, like a soft whisper echoing through deep water. Even people who didn't understand the science could feel the emotion in it. It wasn't cold or robotic. It was pleading, almost like a heartbeat fading in and out. Reporters who were allowed to hear short clips described it as the loneliest sound in the universe. Days turned into weeks. Humanity's curiosity grew stronger than its fear. People began holding candlelight vigils not for a country or religion, but for a world they'd never seen. Artists painted murals of an unseen civilization reaching out. Children asked their parents if aliens had friends. Scientists kept working, driven by both compassion and wonder. Then one day the signal suddenly weakened. The pulse became slower, irregular, like someone losing strength. Everyone in the control rooms froze. They watched helplessly as the once steady rhythm faded to static. Instruments were recalibrated, antennas turned, amplifiers boosted. But the message didn't return to its original power. It was as if the senders were running out of time. Across the planet, silence hung heavy. People who had been watching the nightly updates stared at the news, waiting for any sign of hope. But nothing came. For the first time since it began, the signal faltered. The thought that the senders, whoever they were, might be dying as we listened, sent shivers through everyone. In that moment, humanity realized something profound. The universe wasn't cold and empty. It was alive, fragile, and maybe full of others who were just as scared of being alone as we were. As dawn broke over the desert observatory, the tired technician who had first noticed the signal sat by the window, staring at the sunrise. He thought about how strange it was. Billions of people living their lives on a small blue planet, never realizing that somewhere far away, another world was reaching out, believing that we, of all species, could save them. He didn't know what would happen next. None of them did. But he knew one thing, though. For several nights, the mysterious signal continued to echo through the universe, reaching the large antennas scattered across Earth. It came from the same direction each time, steady, rhythmic, and heartbreakingly clear. Every time it repeated, more scientists joined in, working day and night to unlock the meaning hidden inside those strange pulses of light and sound. Inside one of the decoding centers, there were tired faces, coffee cups half empty, and screens filled with lines of glowing data. Everyone could feel that something big was happening, something far beyond human imagination. But no one could yet understand what the full message meant. The scientists started breaking the signal into smaller parts, searching for logic, numbers, geometry, anything that could point toward meaning. What they discovered left everyone stunned. The code wasn't random. It followed a mathematical rhythm similar to how humans used binary or Morse code, but far more elegant. It had structure, pattern, even emotion. It was almost like listening to a voice trying to stay calm while in pain. One of the researchers noticed something strange in the data, a repeating series of pulses that resembled prime numbers. That was the first confirmation that it had to be intelligent. Nature doesn't send prime numbers into space. Intelligence does. As they decoded more, the pattern revealed images, or rather, a way to build images using light and frequency. When the first visualization appeared on the screen, the entire room went silent. It showed a planet. Not perfectly, but enough to see shapes. Mountains, rivers, and what looked like dark clouds covering most of the surface. The world seemed dim, sick, almost suffocating. The next part of the signal showed smaller shapes. Clusters of buildings, broken structures, and then what looked like tall figures standing on a flat surface. The image was blurry but unmistakable. The figures were waving their arms toward the sky. It wasn't imagination. They were real beings, reaching out. Word spread fast. Every major news channel across the world began broadcasting updates every hour. The headlines changed from possible alien signal detected to images received from another world. People around the world stopped whatever they were doing just to see those fuzzy images of an unknown civilization. For the first time, humanity wasn't looking at the stars with curiosity. They were looking back at someone who was looking at us. Governments met in secret, trying to decide what to do next. But out in the open, scientists were already sharing discoveries faster than anyone could control. The message, when fully analyzed, wasn't only a cry for help. It also carried coordinates, temperature data, and atmospheric readings. The air on their planet was poisonous now, radiation levels high, and the sunlight weak. Whoever sent that signal was describing a world that was dying, a world once full of life, now losing its last breath. But the strangest part came later. Hidden deep within the message, the signal carried fragments of something familiar. Earth's own radio waves. The same frequencies used in early human broadcasts from almost a century ago. When decoded, faint traces of old Earth sounds came through. Static mixed with pieces of music, old speeches. Even a news jingle that once played on radio stations decades earlier. It was impossible to mistake. Someone had heard us first. That discovery shocked everyone. Humanity had spent decades wondering if anyone out there knew we existed. Now it was clear they did. These beings had been listening to Earth for years, maybe even centuries, collecting our stray radio signals as they traveled through space. The realization sent chills through every scientist. Somewhere on a faraway planet, someone had built machines that listened. And among all the signals they could have found in the universe, they had focused on ours. But why us? That question echoed across every news channel and online debate. Why would a dying world call humanity, a species still struggling with its own problems, for help? We weren't the most advanced. We weren't peaceful or perfect, and yet they believed we could save them. Some scientists thought maybe we were the closest civilization they could detect. Others believed there was something deeper. Maybe they had studied us long enough to understand what kind of creatures we were. Maybe they saw something in humans that even we didn't always see in ourselves. a stubborn will to survive, no matter how harsh the world gets. As decoding continued, the signal began revealing more. The language pattern changed slightly every few cycles, as if it were adjusting itself, learning to communicate better. The artificial intelligence systems analyzing it found emotion patterns, rises and falls in tone that matched human expressions of fear, sadness, and hope. It was no longer just data. It was a voice. When the first fully reconstructed version of the message was played aloud through a speaker, the entire control room went quiet. It was a low, trembling sound, something between a whisper and a melody. It didn't sound human, but it carried emotion that every person in that room could feel deep inside. It was the sound of desperation and hope mixed together. Reporters who were later allowed to hear a short version described it as the most haunting sound they'd ever experienced. People who listened said it made them cry without knowing why. It was like listening to a stranger on the edge of the world, begging not to be forgotten. Soon the signal became the center of everything. The news, the debates, the prayers. The world seemed to pause. People forgot about their daily problems for a while. They looked up at the night sky again, something most hadn't done in years. Children asked their parents if the other people were scared. Artists painted the alien planet in their own imaginations. Cities falling apart under dim red skies, small glowing figures sending light into the void. Religious leaders said the signal was a reminder that creation was far bigger than anyone had imagined. Skeptics said it was a natural phenomenon that humans were romanticizing. Politicians argued over whether answering would be wise. Some warned that it could be dangerous and that humans might be exposing their location to something far more powerful. But deep down, most people didn't care about politics. They just wanted to help. The idea that someone somewhere was calling out for help was powerful enough to break through borders and fears. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. A second transmission came. This one was weaker but slightly different. The pattern at the start was the same, but after a few moments it changed. There were new codes, shapes that didn't appear before. When reconstructed, the images showed the same alien world, but this time with visible cracks across the ground, as if the surface itself was splitting. Scientists realized the first signal might have been sent months, maybe even years before. What they were seeing now could already be old news. That thought made everyone anxious. The beings who had sent the message might already be gone. Maybe the message was just an echo from the past, traveling through space long after they had perished. But no one wanted to believe that. Humanity had only just met them, even from afar, and the idea that they might already be gone was too painful. So the work continued, faster than ever. Translation teams worked around the clock. Computer programs learned to match alien logic with human symbols. Every breakthrough was shared instantly between research centers. And then, after weeks of effort, they found something truly amazing. The signal contained not only coordinates to their planet, but also what looked like instructions. Simple diagrams showed mathematical formulas, structures, and energy measurements, possibly showing how to generate or stabilize something. Some scientists believed these could be instructions for building technology that might help restore their planet's atmosphere or shield it from radiation. It wasn't only a cry for help. It was also a plan. They were asking for help, but they were also offering knowledge, as if saying, if you can hear us, here's what you need to know to help us or to help yourselves. The discovery pushed the world into a frenzy of excitement and hope. Universities formed special departments just to study the signal. Millions of people volunteered to help translate, analyze, or simply support the scientists. The world, which had always been divided by politics and race and borders, suddenly began to unite for something far bigger than any of those differences. For once, humanity wasn't fighting over who was right. They were working together to understand something beyond themselves. Even ordinary people started doing small things that showed the signal had changed them. Families gathered at night to watch the stars together. People who never cared about science started learning how radio telescopes worked. Musicians began composing songs using the rhythm of the alien signal. It was as if the universe had reminded humans what it meant to feel connected again. But not everyone felt peace. Some groups began spreading fear. They said that answering the message could bring danger, that the Senders might be trying to locate and destroy Earth. These voices grew louder as governments hesitated to make a public decision about replying. Yet despite fear and politics deep inside the research stations, a quiet group of scientists kept working on one goal: to send a reply. They believed that if the message had truly come from intelligent beings, the least humanity could do was to acknowledge it. And so secretly, without public attention, a plan began forming, to craft a message that would represent all of Earth. It would not be about power, wealth, or politics. It would be a simple reply. When the alien message was finally understood, the world entered a new kind of silence. Not the silence of fear, but of awe. For a few days, there were no arguments, no distractions. Every news channel replayed the decoded signal, the faint heartbeat, the blurred images of that distant world. People didn't know what to feel: wonder, pity, fear. But the silence didn't last. Soon questions started flooding in, questions no one on Earth had ever had to answer before. Who should respond? Should we even respond at all? What if it's dangerous? What if they are peaceful and we ignore them? What if they're already gone? The world suddenly realized how unprepared it was for something like this. At the United Nations headquarters, meetings went on day and night. Representatives from every major country gathered around long tables, arguing, whispering, debating. On one side were those who believed Earth should immediately reply to the alien SOS, a message of friendship, hope, and help. On the other were those who feared that replying could bring disaster, that we might be revealing our location to a civilization far more advanced than ours. "We can't even trust each other," one delegate said sharply. "How can we trust someone we've never seen from a place we don't understand?" Another replied calmly, "They didn't send us a threat. They sent us a cry for help. That means they're desperate, not dangerous." Every argument was logical, every concern real, but the truth was simple. Nobody knew what would happen next. Outside those political halls, the rest of the world was living a different story. People were talking about the signal everywhere, in schools, markets, buses, and living rooms. It was no longer just a scientific discovery. It had become something deeply human, a mirror reflecting what kind of species we were. For the first time, humanity saw itself the way an outsider might see it. A world full of wars and divisions, but also compassion, courage, and kindness. We were violent and yet caring, fragile but unbreakable. That's when scientists began calling humans the Deathworlders. It wasn't an insult. It was a strange kind of compliment. Earth, after all, was known as one of the harshest habitable planets, full of storms, volcanoes, earthquakes, diseases, and predators. Yet humans not only survived here, they thrived. They adapted, built, and dreamed. To any other species, that kind of resilience would seem terrifying or inspiring. So when the alien signal reached Earth, the name Deathworlders became a symbol of hope. Maybe that's why the aliens had chosen us, not because we were perfect, but because we refused to give up, no matter how hard life became. Meanwhile, the debate grew louder. In some countries, leaders gave public speeches promising that Earth would stand ready to help any life in need. They spoke of compassion beyond borders, of how helping another world could remind us of our shared humanity. But not everyone agreed. Many people were afraid. They remembered old stories, myths, and movies about hostile aliens conquering planets. Fear began to grow like wildfire. Some scientists warned that we didn't even know if the message was genuine. What if it's a trick? They asked. What if we're being watched right now? Others pushed back. If someone sends a message saying they are dying, and we do nothing, what does that make us? The argument wasn't just about science anymore. It was about what kind of species we wanted to be. In universities, students held late-night discussions sitting under the stars, wondering what those distant beings might look like. Children drew pictures of aliens and humans shaking hands. Musicians created songs inspired by the signal's rhythm. And in small towns, people gathered to look through old telescopes, staring toward the faint red star where the message had come from. For a moment, the human race was united by curiosity and by conscience. Then the first global poll came out. More than half the world's population voted yes, they wanted humanity to answer the SOS. People said things like, if someone is asking for help, we help. That's who we are. But the remaining half still said no. They feared what might come after. They worried about invasion, manipulation, or contamination. We can't even save our own planet. one protester shouted during a live broadcast. How can we save another? That one sentence echoed everywhere. It was true, Earth itself was struggling. Climate issues, wars, greed, we had our own problems. But that was exactly why others believed we should respond. Because we knew what suffering felt like. Because we understood what it meant to lose hope and still keep fighting. While the world argued, the scientific community quietly kept moving forward. The same team that decoded the alien signal began working on a reply. They called it the Unity Project. It wasn't an official government plan. It was born from cooperation, researchers from dozens of countries joining together out of passion, not politics. They worked in secret labs, in small observatories, and even in private garages with homemade antennas. Their goal was simple: to build a message that represented all of humanity, not just one country or one leader. They agreed on one thing. The reply must carry no arrogance, no threats, no lies. Only truth, it would say in the simplest possible way. We hear you. We want to understand. We want to help. But before sending anything, they needed permission. And that's where the real battle began. At a high-level meeting, world leaders faced a decision unlike any before. Should humanity speak to another world for the first time in history? Some said it wasn't our right, that such a choice should be left for future generations when we were more advanced. Others said waiting was cruel. The aliens might not have much time left. The head of one research agency stood up and said softly, "When a child cries for help in the dark, you don't wait until morning to check if it's safe. You go." That sentence changed the mood in the room. For the first time, silence fell, a silence filled with thought, not fear. Outside, the public grew restless. People wanted answers. Protesters filled the streets, some carrying signs that said, "Help them," and others warning, "Don't answer." It was chaos mixed with emotion. And yet through all the noise, one truth kept shining. Humans had always been explorers. Curiosity was in our blood. We had crossed oceans, climbed mountains, and reached the moon not because it was easy, but because something inside us always wanted to know what's next. Now, the next unknown wasn't across the sea or above the clouds. It was 43 light-years away. While leaders hesitated, smaller groups took initiative. Scientists, private companies, and even ordinary citizens started creating miniature beacons, tiny transmitters designed to mimic the alien pattern. They wanted to show the universe that at least some humans were listening. The authorities tried to stop them, warning that unapproved transmissions could be dangerous. But no one could stop the idea anymore. The thought that another world was dying, waiting for us, one had already entered human hearts. And sometimes, hearts move faster than governments. As debates continued, one quiet moment captured the world's attention. A young astronomer appeared on a live broadcast and said, "Maybe we were never meant to find aliens who are stronger than us. Maybe we were meant to find those who need us so we can remember what being human really means." That line spread everywhere, on posters, screens, and songs. People started to believe that answering the message wasn't just about saving someone else. It was about saving a part of ourselves that had been lost, the part that believed in kindness beyond reason. Days turned into weeks, and the pressure on world leaders grew. The alien signal was still repeating, weaker now but still steady, like a heartbeat refusing to stop. Every time it pulsed, people felt as if it were asking the same question again and again. Will you answer? Finally, a decision was made. A global announcement went out. A special international committee would be formed to prepare a safe, coordinated reply. It would include the best scientists, linguists, philosophers, and engineers from every corner of the planet. They called it Project Solace, and because, in the end, it was about giving comfort across the stars. That night, for the first time, Earth looked united. On every continent, people stepped outside to look up at the sky. The signal was invisible to the naked eye, but they all knew where it was, near the faint red star in the east. The night air was quiet, almost sacred. Even in cities full of lights and noise, people stood still for a moment, realizing they were part of something far bigger than themselves. It didn't matter what language they spoke or what flag they lived under. Everyone was just a small piece of a species that had finally been noticed by the universe. Some whispered prayers. Others made wishes. A few simply smiled, feeling proud to be human. Back in the control rooms, engineers prepared the transmitters. The first human reply wasn't ready yet. It would take months to design properly. But something inside everyone there felt it had already begun. Because the moment humanity decided to respond, to care, that was the moment the message had been answered. The real connection wasn't through radio waves or signals. It was through empathy, the invisible thread that linked two worlds, both struggling to survive in a vast, silent cosmos. And so, while governments prepared official protocols and scientists worked on their instruments, ordinary people across the planet whispered the same quiet promise whenever they looked at the stars. We hear you. We won't turn away. That night marked the beginning of a new era, not of conquest or discovery, but of understanding. Humanity had argued, feared. In a silent room filled with screens, soft blinking lights, and the steady hum of machines, a group of people sat staring at a monitor that carried the weight of the whole world's hope. The message was ready, the first reply ever crafted by humans for another intelligent species. Every word, every symbol had been checked again and again. It wasn't just a message. It was humanity's heart, sent across the cold emptiness of space. No one spoke much that day. The atmosphere was heavy with quiet excitement and fear. For years, people had debated what to say, how to say it, and even if it should be said. But now all that noise had faded. The scientists, engineers, and linguists in that control room had one clear purpose: to let whoever was out there know that the human race was listening, and that they cared. The message was simple, built in binary patterns, easy for any intelligent species to read. It began with numbers and symbols, followed by visuals, images of the solar system, the position of Earth, and a greeting written through sound waves and light. It showed pictures of human hands, mountains, oceans, animals, and children smiling. It wasn't about showing power. It was about showing life. It was about saying, we exist and we mean no harm. The final part of the message showed humans working together, building, exploring, helping each other in times of disaster. It showed how the same hands that once made weapons also built hospitals and launched rockets into the sky. It was honest, not perfect, because perfection wasn't real. The people sending it knew that honesty mattered more than pride. When the last checks were done, everyone took a breath. The lead operator's hand hovered over a small button. The signal, once sent, would travel billions of miles. It could take years to reach its destination, maybe decades. But still, pressing that button would mark the moment when Earth stopped, being silent in the universe. Transmission. Ready? One voice said softly. The operator nodded and pressed send. A small confirmation light blinked on the screen. Transmission active. That was it. Humanity had spoken. For a few moments, no one moved. Some smiled, some wiped quiet tears, and others simply stared at the screen as if expecting an instant reply. Even though they knew that wasn't possible, outside the night sky stretched endlessly, filled with stars. So many stars that it was impossible not to wonder which one had sent the first message asking for help. News spread fast. Across the planet, people watched the event live. Some cheered, some prayed, and others stayed silent, overwhelmed by the idea that their species had just reached out to strangers in the vast unknown. Commentators called it the message of peace. Children asked their parents what it meant, and for once the answer was beautiful. It means, we are not alone. Days turned into weeks. The signal kept traveling outward, far beyond Mars, past the edge of the solar system. The control center continued to monitor, waiting for any kind of reply. But nothing came. Some people began to lose interest. Media channels moved on to other stories. But the small group who sent the message never stopped listening. Every day they checked the frequencies. Every night they watched the stars, wondering if the message had reached its destination, or if it had been lost forever in the endless silence. Then, one quiet night months later, something changed. It started as a faint echo, a soft repeating pattern buried deep in the static. At first it seemed like interference. The signal was too weak, too faint to be sure. But as they cleaned the data and removed the background noise, a familiar rhythm appeared. It wasn't random. It was intentional. The scientists looked at each other, hearts pounding. The pattern matched the one they had sent in the same rhythm, but changed slightly. It wasn't an exact copy. It was an answer. A message was coming back. The team scrambled to boost the reception. Screens lit up. Computers processed the incoming data. decoding what they could. The signal grew stronger, clearer, as if the other side was adjusting their transmitter. Then the data formed something unexpected: visuals. At first, they were only fragments, flashes of color, light, movement. But then slowly a full image began to take shape. It wasn't Earth, it wasn't even close. The landscape looked rough and lifeless, a planet covered in dust and storms, with skies that looked heavy and dim. But amid the chaos there were structures and shapes, lights, movement. Living beings. Fragile, delicate, moving slowly, but alive. Everyone in the room stopped breathing for a moment. The aliens weren't monsters or glowing creatures from old movies. They looked almost like fragile plants that had learned to walk, their bodies slender and shimmering in faint light. They moved together in groups, helping one another as if unity was part of their nature. Then came the most powerful image of all, a group of them standing near what looked like a ruined tower. They lifted their hands, or what seemed like hands, toward the sky. One of them held something glowing, sending waves of light upward. And then came the moment that broke every heart watching. A wave, a simple human-like gesture as if saying, "We see you." The control room filled with quiet emotion. No one spoke. Some were smiling through tears. After so many months of silence, someone had finally answered. The aliens had not only received the message, they had understood it. The returning signal carried short bursts of data after that. It looked like coordinates, environmental readings, and more visuals. The alien world was struggling. Storms, broken structures, and signs of fading energy. Their cities looked like they were falling apart. And yet there was hope in every image they sent. Hope that maybe far across the stars someone was listening. Earth watched in awe. When the footage was shared publicly, people everywhere stopped whatever they were doing. For a moment, the world felt united again. It didn't matter where people lived, what language they spoke, or what beliefs they held. Every single person looking at those alien images understood one thing: life was out there and it was reaching back. Scientists worked day and night to decode more from the transmission. Some parts of it were complex, filled with strange symbols no one could understand. But others were simple, drawings, possibly made by the aliens themselves. One showed two planets connected by a line, light moving between them. Another showed shapes that looked like hands touching. It was communication through emotion, not words. In the days that followed, the atmosphere on Earth changed. For years, people had fought over differences, borders, and politics. But now, a single truth had changed everything. Humanity wasn't alone, and someone else in the universe needed their help. Suddenly, the arguments that once felt so big seemed small. Children made drawings of the aliens and their world. Scientists started preparing better communication systems. Artists painted murals showing humans and aliens side by side. Even people who had once feared the idea of contact began to believe in something bigger, the idea that compassion could travel across light years. Back at the control center, the team who had sent the message still worked long nights. They had one goal now: to build a stable communication channel. They sent shorter replies thanking the aliens, sending visuals of Earth's night sky, showing oceans, forests, and people waving at the stars. It was strange. But somehow, even though no words were shared, everyone felt connected. The aliens seemed to understand the emotional tone behind the signals. Their responses grew clearer, faster. They began sending structured data, patterns that looked like maps, energy readings, maybe even blueprints. The scientists believed it was information about their planet's condition, possibly a call for help. It became clear that their world was dying. The storms that once covered small areas now swallowed entire continents. Their power systems were failing. They didn't have the strength to rebuild. They were trying to survive, but time was running out. And yet, even through all that, their messages carried hope. They kept sending signals of light, patterns that matched human heartbeat rhythms as if to say, "We're still alive." When one of the scientists finally decoded a major part of their data, he realized something astonishing. They had been watching Earth for decades. Long before sending their SOS, they had already studied human broadcasts, learning from radio and television waves that leaked into space. They had seen humanity's chaos, but also its beauty. They had chosen to reach out to Earth because they believed that if anyone could help, it would be the ones who had survived their own world's challenges. That realization left everyone speechless. Humanity had been chosen, not because it was perfect, but because it was strong. The aliens had seen the worst and best of humans and still believed in their goodness. The night the discovery was announced, millions of people stood outside looking at the stars. Somewhere out there, fragile beings were looking back, waiting, hoping that the Deathworlders, as some now called humanity, would keep their promise to answer the call. No one knew what would happen next. But one thing was certain: the universe was no longer a lonely place. And deep inside that quiet control room, as the next transmission began to prepare for launch, the same words echoed in everyone's hearts: "We heard you, and we're coming." The moment the alien reply was confirmed, something shifted deep inside humanity. For years, the world had been divided by fear, politics, and competition. But now all those differences began to fade, replaced by one question: what do we do next? The answer didn't come overnight. Scientists and governments argued for weeks. Some wanted to study the signal quietly, afraid of what might happen if humans got too close to an alien world. Others said that if another species was crying for help, ignoring them would be the same as turning away from a drowning person. The debate went on, but deep inside everyone knew what had to be done. Humans had received a call for help, and helping was something they had always done, even when it seemed impossible. That's how the Unity Project began. It wasn't owned by one country. It wasn't funded by one government. It was built by humanity, for humanity, and for those faraway lives waiting across the stars. Engineers, scientists, builders, and dreamers from every corner of Earth came together. They didn't wear one flag. They wore the same symbol, a circle of stars surrounding two hands reaching out to each other. The project's goal was simple in words but enormous in reality: to build a spacecraft that could travel to the coordinates sent by the alien world, carrying not just technology but hope. At first, most people thought it was impossible. The distance was more than 40 light years, far beyond anything humans had ever reached. It would take centuries for a normal ship to get there. But this time something was different. Humanity wasn't working alone. The alien signals included patterns that looked like energy equations and engineering hints, fragments of knowledge far beyond human understanding. They were small clues, almost like pieces of a puzzle. When scientists began decoding them, they realized the aliens had shared something that could change everything: a new kind of propulsion design that could bend space just enough to shorten the travel time. It wasn't faster than light travel, but it was close. It was as if the aliens had known humanity would try to come. Years passed in hard work and unity. Cities built entire research centers just for the project. People donated resources, even small savings, to help. For the first time in history, nations didn't compete to be first. They competed to contribute more. The world had found a common dream again. When the spacecraft design was finally complete, it was unlike anything Earth had ever created. It was tall, silver, smooth, with no sharp edges, a mixture of human engineering and alien inspiration. Its name was chosen through a global vote: Odyssey. The Odyssey wasn't just a machine. It carried a small piece of humanity, a time capsule filled with letters, pictures, songs, and messages from people across the world. Children wrote notes saying, "Be safe." Artists painted visions of hope. Farmers sent grains of soil. Scientists added samples of DNA from animals, plants, and humans, a small symbol of Earth's diversity. The day of the launch was unforgettable. Millions of people gathered to watch it live. In every country, big screens showed the same countdown. Children held small flags. Old people wiped tears, and for once, everyone's hearts beat in the same rhythm. As the countdown reached 0, engines ignited with a deep, glowing light. The Odyssey rose slowly, almost gracefully, into the sky. Its white trail painted the blue atmosphere as the crowd erupted in cheers and tears. In that moment, no one cared about borders or languages. The entire world was one. It wasn't just a spaceship leaving Earth. It was humanity's promise flying into the unknown. Inside the control centers, engineers watched closely as Odyssey entered space. Systems checked green one by one. The special drive, a hybrid of human technology and alien-inspired equations, activated perfectly. Within days, the ship was far beyond the moon, then Mars, then out of the solar system. After that, everything depended on time and patience. Since no human could make that journey alive, Odyssey was mostly automated. It carried hundreds of drones, repair bots, and communication satellites. The crew was virtual. Artificial intelligences built to think, adapt, and feel emotion in simple ways. They weren't human, but they carried humanity's kindness in their programming. Each AI had a voice, a purpose, and a guiding rule: protect life. As Odyssey drifted through deep space, signals continued to pass between it and Earth. People could track its position in real time. School students followed its progress as part of lessons. It wasn't just a mission anymore. It had become a part of daily life. Humanity had a shared story again. Years went by. The ship crossed regions of space never explored before. Clouds of frozen dust, faint radiation zones, and empty stretches so dark they seemed endless. Each time something went wrong, Odyssey systems repaired themselves and continued. The AI voices sent regular updates, calm, patient, filled with quiet hope. Then one year, the signals began to slow. The distance had grown too vast for quick replies. Messages that once took hours now took months. People still watched, still hoped. But slowly, life on Earth moved forward. New generations were born, and though they didn't feel the same excitement, they grew up knowing that their ancestors had once launched a ship of hope into the stars. Time passed, decades, then a century. The mission became history, then legend. People still looked at the night sky and whispered, "Odyssey is out there." And then one day, after years of silence, something incredible happened. A faint signal reached Earth, an old code, one no one had heard for generations. Scientists scrambled to verify it. It was weak, almost gone, but the rhythm was unmistakable. It was the Odyssey, still alive, still traveling. The ship had reached the alien star system. The data took months to arrive, but when it finally did, humanity watched in awe. The screen showed a small red star surrounded by a few rocky planets. One of them glowed faintly blue-green, undamaged but alive. The atmosphere looked broken, filled with storms and dust. The surface showed huge cracks and faded lights, the remains of cities that had once shone brightly. Then came the moment that made every heart stop. Through the ship's cameras, they saw movement, small figures emerging from behind metallic shelters, fragile beings, the same kind that had sent the SOS long ago, now standing under their dying sun. They looked toward the sky as the Odyssey came into orbit. They had survived. The ship sent small drones down carefully, without force, without intrusion. The aliens didn't run away. They stood together, watching, as if they had been waiting for this moment all their lives. The drones projected simple images, the same visuals Earth had once sent. The hands, the oceans, the smiling faces. The aliens responded by lifting their own glowing hands and sending light pulses in the same pattern. It was clear. They remembered. Over the next weeks, the Odyssey's automated systems studied the planet carefully. The data confirmed what humans had feared. The planet's core was unstable, its air thin, its energy sources almost gone. They had been living on borrowed time, but the aliens had adapted in extraordinary ways. They had created small energy spheres that stored sunlight. They had built shelters underground, and they had used the little they had to keep their community alive. Their strength was quiet but powerful. Earth scientists, upon receiving the full transmission, immediately began working on how to help them. It wasn't about taking over or changing them. It was about giving them a chance to live. Plans were made for the next phase, sending larger missions, food supply systems, and environmental stabilizers. Humanity wasn't coming to claim a world. They were coming to save one. As the Odyssey's drones continued to communicate, the aliens began to share more information. They showed ancient symbols carved into their walls, a story of their past. It told of a time when their planet had been full of life, until their own mistakes broke the balance. But they had never given up. When they discovered Earth's broadcasts, they had seen something familiar, a species that had struggled, fought, and yet survived. They had seen their own reflection in humanity. That's why they had called for help. Not because humans were the strongest, but because they were the most stubborn survivors in the galaxy. The signals between Odyssey and the alien world grew more emotional. They began exchanging songs, tones made of light, patterns of rhythm, and even pictures of children. Across 40 light-years, two worlds that had once been strangers now shared a bond deeper than language. Back on Earth, the news reignited something powerful. People remembered why they had built the Unity project. Donations poured in again. Students joined space programs. Artists wrote songs about the children of two worlds. The idea of saving another species gave humanity a purpose far greater than any nation or war ever had. And somewhere, floating quietly in the darkness, the Odyssey continued to orbit that fragile world. A silent witness to the moment when two civilizations met not through fear, but through compassion. It was proof that kindness could travel farther than light. The journey that had started with a faint SOS had now become something much bigger, the beginning of a friendship that would reshape how humanity saw itself. And though no one knew what challenges lay ahead, one truth echoed across both worlds. They were no longer alone in the universe. And the Deathworlders, the ones once known for surviving the harshest planet, had finally proved that their greatest power was not survival, but empathy. The first contact had already changed humanity forever, but what happened next would change the universe. After the Odyssey's message arrived, the world was filled with a kind of hope it hadn't felt in generations. News of the successful connection with the alien world spread faster than light itself, reaching every home, every heart. People stood outside at night staring at the stars, whispering softly that the beings out there were alive and waiting for them. For a while, Earth felt different. Countries that once fought over power began to cooperate again. Schools taught children not just about continents and oceans, but about the new planet, the one humans now called Elendra. It was no longer a name from science fiction. It was real, a place filled with fragile, luminous beings that had trusted humanity with their lives. But helping them wouldn't be simple. Elendra was dying. Its core was unstable, its atmosphere thin, and its water supplies dangerously low. Every reading from the Odyssey confirmed that the planet had only a few decades left before it became completely uninhabitable. Humanity faced a choice: watch them fade away, or do something no one had ever done before. Meetings began again at the Unity Center, where scientists and world leaders gathered daily. They studied every signal, every image the Odyssey sent back. The aliens, who had started sending more frequent messages, seemed to understand what was happening to their planet, but they didn't beg for rescue. They simply shared their stories, their songs, and their memories. They wanted to be remembered if they didn't survive. That broke every human heart that heard it. No one wanted that kind of ending. Humanity had made too many mistakes on its own planet. Wars, greed, pollution. But this time they had a chance to do something right. So a new plan began, something even bigger than the Odyssey. It was called the Horizon Mission. Unlike Odyssey, which was mostly robotic, Horizon would carry living humans. Scientists, engineers, and medics went to Elendra. They wouldn't go to conquer or colonize. They would go to heal. Building the Horizon took more than a decade. The same hybrid technology used in Odyssey was upgraded and expanded. Energy fields that could bend the path of space were refined to shorten the journey. Thousands of people worked without rest, driven by the dream of reaching Elendra before it was too late. When Horizon finally stood ready, it was a masterpiece, a massive, glowing, built for both speed and endurance. It carried not weapons or armies, but greenhouses, medicine, water recyclers, and environmental stabilizers. Its mission wasn't war, it was restoration. The crew selected for the journey was small but diverse. Men and women from different parts of the world, chosen not just for their skills but for their hearts. They had trained for years, learning not only about science but about compassion, how to approach beings who thought and felt differently. On launch day, the same excitement filled the air that once surrounded the Odyssey's takeoff. Crowds gathered again, but this time it felt even more emotional. Because this time humans weren't just sending a signal or a machine, they were sending themselves. As the countdown began, the captain of the Horizon gave a final message to Earth. His voice was steady, full of quiet emotion. We go not as explorers or conquerors, but as friends. We go because life, no matter how different, deserves a chance. Then the engines roared to life and Horizon rose through the clouds, glowing like a new star being born. The world watched until it disappeared into the night sky. Years passed. Communication with Horizon continued, though it grew slower the farther it went. People grew older, generations changed, but the mission never faded from memory. Children learned about it in schools, drawing pictures of the alien world and the brave humans traveling there. Then, after decades of waiting, the first real-time message arrived. The horizon had reached Elendra. The ship entered orbit above the fading planet. Through thick storms and flickering light, the crew saw what Odyssey had seen years earlier. The pale blue glow of a dying world, still holding on to life. But this time they weren't just observers. They were there to help. Landing wasn't easy. The air was thin and the ground was unstable, but with patience and precision, the horizon touched down on a wide plain near one of the alien shelters. The moment the doors opened, the world held its breath. Through the thick, dust-filled air, the crew saw movement, dozens of glowing figures watching from a distance. The aliens didn't run or hide. They stood quietly, their forms shimmering like reflections of moonlight as if they had been waiting for this moment. The first human stepped out of the ship slowly, wearing protective gear. There was no grand speech, no dramatic music, just silence. Then gently the human raised a hand and waved. The aliens responded the same way, lifting their delicate hands, glowing faintly in the dim light. That single gesture broke centuries of fear between two worlds. From that day, everything began to change. The humans built small bases to stabilize the air and water. They released drones that cleaned the toxic dust and planted fast-growing alien-adapted vegetation, developed from samples the Odyssey had collected. They worked side by side with the Elendrans, teaching and learning at the same time. The aliens didn't have voices like humans. They communicated through pulses of light and vibration. Emotions turned into rhythm. It took time, but soon both sides began to understand each other without words. The Elendrans were gentle, thoughtful, and curious. They shared their songs, glowing waves that rippled through the air, and humans recorded them, calling them light music. The bond grew stronger each day. When Earth received the first full video from Horizon, the entire planet celebrated. The footage showed humans and Elendrans together, working, laughing, helping each other. Children on Earth watched in wonder, their eyes wide as they saw real aliens standing beside humans, building shelters together. The world that had once been divided by borders now felt united again, all because of a friendship born across the stars. But the mission wasn't without struggle. Elendra's core was still unstable, and no amount of technology could fix it completely. The humans did everything they could to slow down the decay, redirecting energy, reinforcing the planet's crust, and saving as much life as possible. Still, time was running out. That's when humanity made another decision that changed everything. Instead of trying to save the planet, they would save the people. The Horizon team began constructing ships, and not massive, but enough to carry the Elendrans to safety. Using combined technology, they built sleek, luminous vessels designed to travel back toward Earth and its nearby colonies. When the first evacuation day arrived, the Elendrans stood together, watching the skies where their ancestors had once sent an SOS. Now, they were leaving that same world behind, and not in fear, but in hope. As the ships lifted off, their glowing trails lit up the dusty sky, creating the most beautiful sight anyone had ever seen. Humans and Elendrans stood side by side, watching their home fade into light. The journey back took years. But when the Elendrans finally arrived at Earth's space colonies, humanity welcomed them not as outsiders but as family. They built homes that mimicked the gentle light and climate of Elendra, planting the same glowing plants that once grew there. Slowly, life began again, not just for one species but for two. The aliens adapted in their own way. Some began to learn human gestures, and smiling, waving, pointing. Children loved them, following their glowing movements and learning how to speak in light. The Elendrans, in return, taught humans patience, balance, and peace. They didn't understand anger the way humans did, and somehow, that calmness spread wherever they went. Years later, when the Horizon mission ended and the crew returned home, the world celebrated like never before. Streets filled with people holding candles and lights, honoring the team who had not only saved a species, but reminded humanity what it meant to be kind. The Odyssey still orbited the dead planet, a silent monument to the moment it all began. Sometimes it sent faint signals back to Earth, patterns of light and sound that felt almost like whispers of gratitude. And though Elendra was gone, it had left behind something far greater: unity. The story of the Deathworlders and the ElevenLabs became part of human history. It was taught in schools, written in books, and remembered in songs. People often said that it was the first time humans had truly lived up to their best selves, not by fighting, not by conquering, but by answering a cry for help with love. The universe was vast, and there were still many unknowns out there. But now, whenever people looked up at the stars, they didn't feel alone. Somewhere among those endless lights, they knew friends were watching too. In the end, the name Deathworlders changed its meaning forever. It no longer meant a species known for danger or survival. It came to mean the ones who answered, the ones who heard a cry across the universe and reached out with compassion instead of fear. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing a civilization can do isn't to conquer another world, but to save one. And that is how the most dangerous species in the galaxy proved that their greatest weapon was their heart.